everyone. Welcome to today's episode in Secure Insights. My name is Tasneem Lokanwala. I am a digital marketing executive here at Sennovate and your host for this episode. Today's topic is about understanding application security. Our special guest speaker for today is Derek Fisher, an award-winning author, speaker, leader, and university instructor with decades of experience in all facets of engineering, from hardware to software to cybersecurity. Good morning, Derek. It is a pleasure to have you here and thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Perfect. Okay. So, Derek, would you like to say a few things about what you are currently doing or anything specific that you would like our audience to know?
Sure. I've been in the product security, application security space for most of my time in security. As you mentioned, I started out in hardware and then got into software and then eventually moved into security. So I think having that background over the past few decades has given me kind of insight into how applications are built, how they're run, where they sit in terms of the hardware. And I think that gives me a little bit of a good perspective on the security of that entire stack, not just from the software perspective, but the entire stack. I teach at Temple University here in the Philadelphia area. It's in the Northeast of the United States, and been teaching software security there for several years. And I think that's been a pretty good indication of where a lot of students that are going to these universities trying to learn about security. And it's been very interesting to see the desire for those that are going through technical degrees, whether it's a computer science degree or information systems program. It's good to see that there's a desire to learn about security. And I've been happy to do that for several years. Also, as you mentioned, I have written a few books. So I do have a handful, a series of children's books on using technology safely and securely. That's been a bit of a passion from myself. I do appreciate and do understand. Obviously teaching at a university has helped me kind of understand that education is a primary function for us in security to be able to pass on that knowledge to other people. And our children are growing up in a very different environment than many of us grew up in when we were younger. And so I think there's a lot of unique challenges around using technology safely and securely. And I wanted to kind of pass that information on to children and their parents about what are some of the concerns that you have to be aware of as somebody utilizing technology at a young age. And then lastly, I did write a application security book that's been published by Manning. And that book really talks about what does a application security program look like from start to scratch, and what are all the from start to finish, and what are all the different parts that make up an application security program. And writing that was really about documenting my journey and my understanding in application security as I've been going through this career. And so I'm glad that many people have found it pretty helpful in their own journeys in application security, and I'm always glad to hear that.
Great. Thank you for sharing. So let's start off with the basics first. So can you tell us what is application security? Why is it crucial for individuals and organizations currently?
So if you ask a handful of people, you'll probably get a handful of answers in terms of what application security is and what it looks like. But for me, application security means, how do we develop secure practices in the design and development of applications that go to clients and customers. And the kind of the historical approach to security has been to try to defend the outer shell. How do we build security into the network, into the host, into the data centers, the physical locations, maybe some level of data protection. But a lot of times security has been built around protecting kind of that what we always call the hard outer shell. And application security looks more at the software that is being developed by an organization and being delivered to customers. And there's a lot of gaps in how security gets integrated into those applications. Developers are not security professionals. A lot of them have very good security knowledge. I've run into plenty of developers that have very good security knowledge, but that's not their day job. Their day job is to take a requirement and turn that into a function that a client can consume. And if they can integrate security along the way, great. But that's not the primary purpose of what they are charged to do for that day. So application security is really trying to define a path for secure development so that developers, when they're writing their code, are able to integrate the most secure controls around that code before it gets out to the client.
All right. So how has the landscape of application security evolved in the recent years? Like what are the key trends driving these changes?
So I think that if you go back 5-10 years for application security, a lot of it was focused on running a static analysis tool or some type of code scanning tool and doing penetration testing. And those were kind of the two ways that application security was thought of. And that gets you some good understanding of like what are the security issues in the code that we're writing, and what does that look like in a running environment. So the SaaS tool is going to find security vulnerabilities in the code as it sits, and then the penetration testing is going to find vulnerabilities in the code as it's running. And over the years, we've kind of shifted to this concept of what we call shift left. And lately there's been a lot of discussion about is shift left the right direction? Should we be looking at other ways of integrating security? But fundamentally, the concept of shift left is still valid in the sense that you want to make sure that you're building in security as far left in the software development lifecycle as possible. And you do that through things like threat modeling, through secure design reviews, through secure code reviews. Tooling still plays a part in that, whether you're doing SaaS type of tools, but also things like the supply chain security and making sure that open source software is coming from a reputable source, that your CI/CD pipeline is secure, and that your delivery mechanisms to deliver that package or that container to a running environment is secure. So we've come a long way from just scanning the code and running a pen test to really breaking apart the entire lifecycle and pipeline to getting code from a developer's environment to a production environment, and ensuring that along that way that we're building in those guardrails to ensure that that code is secure.
Okay. So are there any primary threats and vulnerabilities that applications face today? Like how can organizations then protect against them?
So I think there's always a lot of threats. There's no shortage of threats and vulnerabilities. I've been saying this a lot lately, is that we can application security teams can find vulnerabilities all day, and because that's just the nature of the business that we're in. And so when you think about kind of the highest risks and I would say is what's kind of prevalent at this point is really around supply chain security. That's been a very hot topic lately in terms of when you look at the way software is developed. And for those that are software engineers will understand this, is that a lot of the code that you write, or I should say the application that you create, or the application that you create, most of that is not actually code that you wrote. Most of that is not actually code that you wrote. Most of that is code that you have pulled in from third-party libraries, open source software, maybe built into the framework, but a lot of the code that gets delivered to the production environment is not code that you've ever even seen, or that you've even written. And so that opens up a massive attack surface when it comes to the application, where if you are not sure about where you're getting those third-party libraries and that software that you're packaging in and delivering to a production environment, that's an opportunity for an attacker to get in there and change, to potentially push a malicious package into your running application. And there's been a pretty prominent example of that with SolarWinds, where there was a malicious package that was injected into the development pipeline for SolarWinds that was then pushed out to many different clients, which enabled these attackers to basically hit multiple organizations by compromising one package. So there's definitely a force multiplier aspect to supply chain security, and definitely something that's been very high on the radar for a lot of organizations lately.
Okay. So what role does secure coding play in application security? Like, are there some key principles developers should keep in mind?
I think the biggest thing is to really understand what insecure code looks like. And we're not expecting software engineers to be security gurus or security superheroes. They're there to create code that's going to meet the requirements that the clients are looking for and get to a production environment as quickly as possible. So when it comes to writing secure code, it's important to understand, what does insecure code look like? Are there practices that will create these potential insecure functions and features? So OWASP is a great example of what are the top, not just web application, but API related issues, the web application issues. There's many different lists that OWASP maintains. There's plenty of training out there in terms of software development security that'll teach you about, again, what to look for in terms of writing secure code. But the expectation for developers shouldn't be that you're going to become a security superhero. It's more, how do I avoid the patterns that lead to insecure code? And the best way to do that is, again, going through something like OWASP, getting trained on secure practices, and definitely a lot of reading material out there as well.
So how does DevSecOps integrate security into the application development lifecycle, and what benefits does it bring?
So I think, when you talk about DevSecOps, it's very similar to the application security definition. A lot of people are going to have different answers for what DevSecOps looks like and what it means. For me, DevSecOps basically means that you're taking the current process that an organization has to deliver code from development environment to production, and you're bolting security into that pipeline. So DevOps is real, or DevOps and DevSecOps are really practices. They're not tools. They're not it's not a thing. It's a set of practices and principles that an organization will put in place. And so that really means that you want to integrate security into the development practices, the operational practices. And development practices would be things like that shift left mentality. How do we get security tools into the hands of developers so that when they're writing code, they have the confidence that the code they're writing is secure? And you can do that by integrating tools into the development environment, the IDE, and you can also do that by integrating the tools into the things like the CI, making sure that there's a fast feedback loop back to the engineer, the developer, that says, hey, there's a vulnerability in the code that you wrote. Here's a proposed way of remediating that issue, and that ideally occurs in the IDE. But if not in the ID, definitely in the CI, so that the developer is able to get that information as quickly as possible. And then on the operational side, you want to make sure that you have all the monitoring and protection security controls in place. So things like a WAF or runtime protection, container scanning and security. And once again, you want to have those in such a way that that feedback loop to the development team is fast and actionable, so that they have the ability to know that there is an issue in production. Here's the way we need to fix it. And if you have a well-running DevOps pipeline, you're able to push code to that production environment quickly. Again, many organizations that are truly embracing DevOps, they can and have that fast CI/CD pipeline, are able to push code to production multiple times a day. And I think that's helpful from a security perspective, because if you find something in production, you're able to then quickly turn that into a patch and push to production in a quick way. So when I look at that DevSecOps and the principles around that, it really means code fast, get it to production quickly, but also have that fast feedback loop to the development team.
Okay. So how does compliance such as GDPR or HIPAA, HIPAA impact application security? Like, what steps should organizations take to ensure compliance?
So that's tricky because every organization is going to have different requirements based on, one, where they're located, and what kind of data they collect. Not just GDPR and HIPAA, but you also have things like in the United States, we have CCPA, the California Consumer Protection Act. And there's, of course, there's compliance and regulatory controls in India. There's regulatory controls outside of GDPR that are in Europe. And so what I think we are seeing in this space is that there's definitely a lot of push for data privacy and data security, which is good. That means that we're showing that we are serious about getting the controls around the data that a lot of organizations and applications collect. PCI is another example of where we have specific controls around financial data and credit card. PCI is specific to credit cards, but these different frameworks are all there. These different frameworks and regulatory controls are all there to ensure that data is being well protected and secured. Where I think the challenges come in is that each one of those, so a lot of the large organizations may have to be aware of all of those. So HIPAA is very specific to healthcare. PCI is very specific to credit cards. GDPR is very specific to regional and geolocation for data. But if you're a global company, you may be impacted by all of those. And so when it comes to understanding that and what that means for the development team, that's where a strong GRC type of function within an organization will help really try to understand, what does that mean for the organization? What does that mean for the products that we're developing? What does that mean for the data that we're collecting? And then that gets down into the developers in terms of the requirements that meet those regulatory controls.
Right. Can you share some real-world examples or case studies where improved application security had a significant impact on the organization?
So that's a tough one. I had to think a little bit about this one because I think where you see the biggest impact in terms of application security is where it's grassroots. And what I mean by that is that when developers have the desire to write more secure code, anytime you get into a situation where you're writing code or that you're pushing an application security program against a organization that just doesn't want to have application security in their organization, you're you're going uphill and you're pushing up against a brick wall. So where you see the most effective types of application security programs is really in the spaces where the development team is open for not just that change, but to be part of the journey to build security into that organization. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of companies obviously like Google, like Microsoft, where a lot of their SDLC and secure, software development practices are pretty robust, and they show how, there's a desire to write secure code and to deliver secure applications to end users. But another kind of mark of an organization that's doing it well is how quickly can you patch? How quickly can you find an issue and be able to turn that around into a patch and resolve an issue? And there's organizations that do that very well, and then there's organizations that don't. So hopefully that kind of gives you some context into there's not one shining example that I can think of, but there's a lot of definitely markers that show hey, here's an organization that does it well, or what is a organization that does it well? What do they look like? What can they do? Patching fast, having developers that are interested in actually building secure functions are definitely very good hallmarks of that.
Okay. So we have come to the last question of the podcast. How do you foresee the future of application security evolving, and what should businesses or individuals be prepared for?
Yeah, there's been this kind of shift from application security kind of being decentralized, that static analysis and penetration testing, and creating these reports and throwing them to the development teams and saying, hey, go fix it. And we're shifting kind of back, we're shifting into this, mode of where the application security team is more hands-on and more integrated with the development process, and making sure that secure code is being developed by making sure that those tools are in place, that engineers have help from the application security team. And I think where we're going to start seeing things shift is a further integration of security into the development team. And it may be that each team is going to have a security, I don't want to say champion, because there are security champions programs out there, but have a specific person that's been hired to do the security work, and that is their job and their role in that development team is to be responsible for the security and to write the security, not just the security rules and controls, but to implement them. And I think that's going to be probably the next iteration of application security, is you're going to start seeing that further integration of application security folks into the development team. I think the other thing that we're going to see as a shift is really this whole AI renaissance that we're going through right now, where there's an opportunity for us to leverage things like generative AI to be able to write secure software, and to put that hopefully in the hands of developers so that they can utilize that technology to help them write more secure code. I think there's definitely a lot of organizations that are looking at that right now, and I think that's going to be an interesting space in the next couple of years.
Perfect. Thank you, Derek, for joining us. It's been a pleasure speaking with you today. And I'm sure, just as I have, our audience has gained some valuable insights into the world of application security.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on, and thank you for giving me the time to talk about this.
Okay, thank you so much.